Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and we will restart. Good afternoon. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this side event, Mainstreaming the Fourth Industrial Revolution in LDCs through Science, Technology and Innovation. My name is Selma Prodanovic and I will be your host today. I'm the Vice President of the European Business Angel Network and I've spent quite a while developing some of the technologies that we will be talking about today. The Fourth Industrial Revolution is being propelled by frontier technologies such as AI, blockchain, 3D printing that are better, cheaper, faster, more scalable and easier to use than ever before. Exciting applications of these emerging technologies resulted in tangible achievements of attaining the SDGs in countries across the globe. The advent of the Fourth Industrial Revolution can help LDCs leapfrog traditional phases of development and accelerate their transition to developed nations. Deploying these technologies optimally and strategically can create a potent mix of resources and infrastructure that can yield better quality, more sustainable growth and development. However, LDCs will need the right mix of policies and instruments to capture the dazzling opportunities that the Fourth Industrial Revolution represents. The thematic focus of this side event will aim to contribute to the Doha Program of Action, leveraging the power of science, technology, and innovation to fight against multidimensional vulnerabilities and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The format of this event today will consist of opening remarks by distinguished speakers, a presentation of the UNIDO 4IR policy brief, followed by an interactive panel discussion. Before we start, just a few housekeeping rules to ensure we are all on the same line. So please kindly mute yourself if you are not speaking. For the audience, if you do have questions, there is a box where you can put in your questions that we will be trying to answer at the end of the session. And of course, this session will be recorded for the purpose of dissemination at a later point. And allow me to introduce the amazing speakers of today. I'm very honored and absolutely overwhelmed with some of the bios. I would please kindly ask you also to check their bios if you can, and also kindly ask to have the slide with the names of our presenters. We will start with Mr. Bernardo Casadila Sarmiento, the Managing Director of Digitization Technology and Agribusiness at UNIDO, and also the Director of the Department of Digitalization, Technology and Innovation. He's a global leader with more than 30 years of international experience in global development and working across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. His Excellency, Ms. Pedro Fernandez Lopez, Secretary of State for Digital Economy of the Government of the Republic of Cabo Verde. Many different actions and activities he has done in his young years. He is the founder of a youth empowerment organization, Generation Be Bright, was selected by MyPad as one of the most influential people in the world of Afro descent under 40, and became the youngest member of the current government of Cabo Verde. Mr. Lugano Wilson, Director of Industries in the Tanzania Ministry of Industry and Trade, and a Senior Research and Development Engineer and Head of Energy Technologies Division with Tanzania Industrial Research and Development Organization. He holds a degree from the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm and a doctorate from the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Mr. Ravi Gupta, the CEO of Tambourine Innovation Ventures, has developed strategies and executed numerous programs and projects in Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and Asia Pacific on topics such as technology commercialization, IP strategy and monetization, venture capital, private equity, and innovation policy. Mr. Joshua Setipa, Managing Director of UN Technology Bank for the least developed countries, with over 20 years of experience in international trade, economic development, and investment strategy. He worked at the World Bank, World Trade Organization, and served as the Minister of Trade and Industry in Lesotho. Educated in the University of Bradford, Australian National University, and National University of Lesotho. Ms. Sabine Dalmo, Chief Executive Officer of Siemens South and Eastern Africa, regarded as one of Africa's most influential women in engineering. She currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer and board member for Siemens in South Africa. She was appointed in many roles, but also as the Deputy Chairperson of the NEPAD business and the Presidential Advisory Council on Investment. Most recently, she was re-elected as board member of the German African Business Association. And Mr. Ratnakar Attikari, Executive Director of Enhanced Integrated Framework, who has been serving on his role as Executive Director since October 2013, prior to which he was the Chief Executive Director of South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics, and Environment. And the closing remarks will be by Mr. Marco Camilla, Chief of Innovation and Digitalization Division at UNIDO. So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to start with our today's event. Absolutely overwhelming, and please kindly welcome. This would be a moment when we would be applauding everybody in the same room. Unfortunately, we're not in the same room, but we are able to connect through technology and the fourth industrial revolution across the world. Everybody somewhere in a different place. And please welcome with me Mr. Bernardo Casadila Sarmiento with your opening remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Selma. Good afternoon. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very, very honored and happy to open this event, Mainstreaming 4IR in LDCs to Science, Technology and Innovation, under this 9th Ministerial Conference of the LDCs. And today, it is very important to think that the discussion about the fourth industrial revolution, whether it is appropriate, whether it's timely, whether we should not be talking about the second or the third revolution, the fact is, and this is the positive news, is that developing countries, LDCs, are making the 4IR technologies already a reality in their countries. The new technologies are being used in creative ways to drive structural transformation. And we migrated during COVID-19 to cyberspace, but it was out of necessity. We need now to address, and this happened all over the world, in LDCs, middle-income countries, all over we have been. And these new technologies are being applied in particular in agriculture, in industry, in health and education. But we need really to have a concept of disruptive innovation that will help us to be more open to the new technologies. And before being over-optimistic, we have also to think that the LDCs have a number of serious constraints, and we want to acknowledge that there is limited connectivity. Infrastructure is and remains a big obstacle for the implementation of these new technologies. There is a lack of capacity to absorb and deploy the technologies, infrastructure bottlenecks, unstable electricity, coverage gaps, especially in the suburban and rural areas, and the fact that LDCs have to rely on complex production technologies that are somehow developed, controlled, standardized by advanced countries. In addition, for these structural challenges, we said COVID-19 has affected the productive systems, forcing firms to reduce operation and close. On the other hand, COVID has also made its job to bring us to this digital space, to digital world. But we also saw that the micro, small enterprises have been disproportionately suffering in this process. And also it has affected mostly youth and entrepreneurship at the level of women. These challenges, but also are complemented by very positive trends. The pandemic has accelerated digital transformation. While it was slow in the LDCs, for example, mobile phone infrastructure has served as a cushion to speed up digital finance and remote access. The internet network, mainly in rural urban areas, has allowed companies to advance in using digital technologies. And while it was a bit shy at the beginning, we are witnessing a number of technologies like 3D printing to produce components and build house in Tanzania. The 3D printing example of Tanzania and Togo, where we have witnessed entrepreneurs and startups develop 3D printing from wasted e-material, is something that brings us really to a surrealistic reality where the circular economy is bringing also digitalization, and creativity is there in LDCs. And this is why I have a strong belief that it is possible to move in this direction. We have been also witnessing transport of medical equipment, small production parts, application of drones in agriculture, in inspection, and to enhance the absorption, which is in general low, while we have all these good examples, it is necessary to improve regulation. But also in Rwanda, for example, it is the first country that has such a solid civil aviation drones regulation. Human capital development needs to be strengthened, and the innovation systems. And for this, we need definitely to improve the policy deliverables so that the value chain can efficiently take advantage and continue integrating into the global value chain. Technology transfer and diffusion also can build the bridges to improve policy advice and production processes that can include hardware technologies as well as soft techniques such as quality assurance, quality control, training methods, standards, and norms as necessary. LDCs can also move forward the 4IR by retrofitting the current second industrial revolution and third industrial revolution system, and through technological jumps, leapfrog, complex to achieve, but has gradual improvements, rather continuous improvement that are complemented by these new technologies. Automation and digitalization are not, there is no differentiation on the level. As I said, even small enterprises, entrepreneurs are already using sensors, actuators, production kits to take advantage, and we can move on the fourth industrial revolution in an asymmetric variable geometry. Those windows of opportunities can be opened by countries. Digital policies are fundamental. We have to properly assess resources, give impulse of partnerships. And this is probably one of the other key words to move forward on this. We need digital cooperation. We need digital technology policies, but we need to work together. And we need to put people together. We need to help SMEs to work together, have successful solution by incubators, by knowledge hubs, by industrial parks, but also we will need to do it when we look at finance and look at bringing capital forward. The technologies such as artificial intelligence, big data, drones can also help the enterprise to enhance productivity, competitiveness, and move up the value chain ladder. Clear that technology is changing the global rules of the game, and it is imperative that to link to the global system, we need to make sure that the capacity, be it skills, be it infrastructure, be it regulations, are ready so that we can reduce the inequalities, and especially the notion that nobody should be left behind. So UNIDO is very strongly committed to the LDCs in the path towards industrialization, making sure that technology can complement a people-focused approach, looking at helping the SMEs, gender responsive, finally to work for sustainability. In this regard, we have been preparing the 4IR strategic framework that is entitled Making the 4IR Work for All, with this notion that it should be people-centered, that we should definitely work for young people, for women, and not to forget that today one of the most important challenges related to climate change. So the 4IR framework envisage digital transformation at the firm level, enhanced skills and capacity, innovation ecosystem, partnership, we mentioned, investment. We will need to look how to mobilize investment so that the companies can change and digitally transform, and also investment for the public investment for the correct infrastructure to be there. And finally, we need better governance for technology policies. Let me finalize this welcome by embedding a UNIDO strategic approach into our core activities. We want to work with member states because being a demand-driven organization, we want to listen much carefully to what the member states are telling us in relation to the digital transformation aspirations that they have, and in particular, what the LDCs want to achieve. I look forward to continue this discussion and arrive to action item from this event. I wish fruitful deliberation. Thank you. Back to you, Selma.
Thank you very much, Bernardo, and it is inspiring on getting all together on this path. Allow me now to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Pedro Lopez. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me well. Now I think it's working. Fantastic. First of all, I want to send my regards to all my colleagues of the panel, also to Ms. Selma, that is honoring us doing this moderation of a conversation that I think it's really important to discuss how the fourth revolution will be important for the least developed countries. My name is Pedro Lopes. I'm Secretary of State for Digital Economy of Cabo Verde, a small state in Africa, in Western Africa, close to Senegal. I think better than finding the answers is finding the right questions. So the right question of this conversation should be: how can least developed countries succeed in the fourth industrial revolution? I think the fourth industrial revolution has important key features. Accelerating digitalization is really important. Artificial intelligence as well. Cloud computing, robotics, 3D printing, augmented reality, virtual reality. How many of our young people are prepared in the least developed countries to face this new world, to be prepared and trained on these key features that compose the fourth industrial revolution? What are the governments doing for training young people to be prepared for the future? How is the coordination between NGOs, between startups, between governments again, and between private companies that are that have a different size? I'm talking about not just small private companies, but about multinational companies, because they will need people to be part of this revolution that is happening. Even last week, I received I went to Portugal. We went to participate on the Web Summit, one of the biggest tech events in the world, and we were the only African country with a country stand. We took 10 startups, and Cabo Verde we just have 500,000 people. So being present on this type of events, I always say we don't need to be a wizard to understand the future of the world. And if the least developed countries are not present in this type of platforms, we are failing. So we need to change that. And I hope this conversation can be a conversation, of course, institutional, but also fun. I think startups, they are ahead of governments and ahead of institutions because they have more fun than us. They know what they want, but they know as well that during the way that they can smile. But for the least developed countries, I can present some of the things that are important. Electricity is really fundamental. We cannot talk about fourth industrial revolution if infrastructures are not serving these countries. Access to internet. In Cabo Verde, we are defining the framework for putting internet as a basic good. So people of lower social condition, as we have already for electricity and water, internet should be a basic good for everyone. And the ones that don't have the means to pay should be the government to provide that. And then betting on STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts as well is important, and mathematics. We have to train more and more young people for that. And least developed countries, they should do the leapfrogging, changing completely the educational system. We need to train young people for collaboration, for critical thinking, for creative thinking. Learning how to learn is really, really important, because I think it's the first time, even though we don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, that we can foresee a bit of the future, because we are building it as we talk. So we need to change that. I will talk more during the panel about the specific case of Cabo Verde. People know me as Mr. Cabo Verde in these panels. I always talk about my country. We are very small, so I have to verbalize a lot about my country, and I have to use my voice in these platforms, because not just least developed countries, but also small island states, they need more attention. The problems of the world now are global. We've seen with COVID-19, there is not just a problem of least developed countries, there is not just a problem of Africa, problems are global. So we need global solutions, we need people from different backgrounds, from different countries, because challenges, ladies and gentlemen, they will be more and more global. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this inspiring opening statement, and definitely speaking up for the entrepreneurial spirit and the youth that's coming afterwards. I'm looking forward to this discussion on the panel. I would now like to welcome Mr. Lugano Wilson on the stage. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Basically, in the first place, I would like to thank the organizers, UNIDO and the partners, to organize this important platform where we can share lessons, experience, and also we can see how together we can shape the future. Thank you very much, UNIDO. Fourth industrial revolution calls for modernization, and it calls for collaboration, it calls for globalization, and further it calls for common markets. Therefore, generally it calls for competitiveness. I mean, you cannot go to global markets, to common markets, if you are not competitive in terms of number of products, in terms of products quality, in terms of competitive prices. So all these are issues that we really need to see that they happen, particularly in our developing countries. Therefore, I really believe that in this short period, we are going to capture the most from the expertise we have in this platform, and it will assist all of us to shape our going ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you for the opening remarks. I think this was extremely inspiring of coming together of the spirit of entrepreneurship and how we can really make a difference, each of us making and moving. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ravi Gupta, who will deliver the presentation on propelling LDCs in the digital age, the fourth IR perspective for sustainable development. Mr. Gupta, the floor is yours. We are looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Salma, and good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to present the synopsis of the paper that we have prepared for UNIDO, and I intend to offer a very realistic perspective, both the opportunities as well as the enormous challenges, and some kind of economic context on why this revolution is very different from the others. Salma, I think, will be going through the slides. So if we go to the third slide, then we can see that the fourth industrial revolution is not just about economic production, but it is also about, to some extent, about reorganizing societies. And the 4IR has a potential not just to enhance productivity, but also just greater social welfare, and to some extent, and to a great extent, I would say, to improve social mobility as well. And that's why, in addition to 4IR, which encompasses a whole range of technologies, it's an umbrella term literally used for a whole range of technologies like AI, blockchain, Internet of Things, drones, additive manufacturing, augmented reality, etc. In addition to talking about 4IR, we also talk about Society 5.0, which is a human-centered society that balances the economic advancement and also addresses societal needs in a system that integrates a cyberspace as well as a physical space. And we will discuss more about it later in this presentation. Going to the next slide, it's important to understand this, that 4IR, the context behind 4IR, which is essentially a digitalization and digital transformation. And I know folks talk about digitalization, digitization, and digital transformation. They tend to conflate all these terms, but they are fairly different. And the slide explains why. And the earlier focus on using science, technology, and innovation to address a lot of economic challenges as well as development needs. To that, of course, digitalization has added one more dimension, mostly in this, but under the rubric of innovation. But it's no longer, because in and of itself, the digital transformation and digital revolution has created, a kind of a unique area within the broader topic of innovation. Because entrepreneurship is much more easy in these topics. It's very difficult for a biotech entrepreneur, for instance, to start a company, but it's much easier for a mobile entrepreneur, an IT entrepreneur, to start a company and do something very transformative. And that's the reason why this particular topic, though within the broader context, falls within the broader context of STI, needs to be discussed separately. Then the subsequent slide talks about the decade of action, which obviously calls for the accelerating of sustainable solutions to the world's most daunting challenges, and the delivering of SDGs. But that, as we know, does require additional funding. And the good part about this funding is that the returns are going to be fairly enormous. Unlike, say, in other industries where there's heavy capital investment, and the returns tend to be rather delayed. In the case of 4IR, that the investments tend to be the return on investment tends to be not just higher, but tends to materialize relatively quickly. So that's the beauty about digital transformation and 4IR, and that's why when it comes to funding the fourth industrial revolution, I think the donors as well as other financiers need to keep this in mind. That is, it's not just about economic development, but it's also good for their own bottom line. That is, they would get returns much faster and perhaps at a rate which is far superior. Slide number 6. Of course, 4IR cannot happen because the old development challenges of the LDCs do present an enormous roadblock. Some of the key ones being that, as was discussed earlier, unless we have appropriate infrastructure, that is electricity, etc., and have enough broadband as well as internet connection, it is very difficult to talk about 4IR. And also institutions. And by institutions, we specifically mean governance of data rights, data privacy, data ownership, etc. So because even if there is a very good technology that has a potential to transform a certain industry or a certain social sector, unless the key issues of privacy, data ownership, etc. are not addressed, it is very difficult for some of these technologies to not only just to scale up or even take off in most cases. And naturally, skills. because technology in and of itself is of no use unless it is deployed appropriately and can unlock, economic benefits. So those whole development challenges, of course, remain, but there is increased urgency in addressing them because unless these are addressed, then LDCs would not be able to really capture the benefits of 4IR, and the economic divide between the rich and the poor nations would exacerbate. So I think what this slide calls for is greater urgency of action. Going to the subsequent slides, just to build up on what I had mentioned, that is technology absorption is very important, because just having technology is not enough. And just technology being used by the elite few is not enough. It has to be absorbed, it has to be mainstream, it has to be broadly used. And there are quite a few ways that this technology absorption and diffusion can be fostered and accelerated. Some of the key ones being, concepts like cluster approach or retrofitting, etc. But it's important to keep in mind the challenges that are there for technology absorption. One of them, of course, being access to technology. This, in general, is far lesser in case of digital transfer, in case of fourth industrial revolution, because patents don't play as big a role. They do play a role. It's not that they don't play a role, but they don't play as big a role as they do in other industries. For instance, if in biotech industry, if the research companies do not unlock their patents, they don't release their patents, very difficult for other countries to build industries around those. India has been able to do it using expired patents, but and becoming a generic giant, but it's very difficult. But it's very difficult in general. But in case of digital transformation and 4IR, it's relatively easy, because many of these technologies are not patentable. They tend to be processes, or they tend to be business models, and many of them are just platform technologies which anybody can access. The real challenge in access to those technologies doesn't lie in the north-south classic divide, but it lies typically within the capacity of the LDCs themselves to be able to capture it. And also, of course, gaps in the usage of technology, that is, not having enough skills to be able to deploy it effectively. And of course, the typical infrastructure challenge, the fact that data remains very expensive. Private operators do not really have an incentive to increase connectivity and coverage, etc. But moving on to the subsequent slide, just building upon what was discussed earlier, and that is education and R&D, of course, are very essential for the absorption and diffusion of these technologies. The great thing about the fourth industrial revolution is that not everybody has to, has to necessarily reinvent the wheel, or because these the rate at which technology can be transferred from the more advanced nations to other countries, that particular rate has been falling, thanks due to digitalization. Earlier, say, for example, to become a doctor or whatever, you had to create a vast cadre of medical professionals in any country, and you have to go through several, multi-decade training and build, hospitals, or for that matter, build factories, etc. In case of 4IR, the barrier to entry is far lower. It's much easier for even LDCs to be able to take advantage of this. So it would, so there is therefore a greater call to action by education and R&D would be needed to absorb these particular technologies. Moving on to the next slide, of course, climate change, that's the biggest challenge of this particular century. And 4IR, interestingly, does offer fairly good avenues to address that. One of the, of course, LDCs in general are not very big carbon emitters, but what they could do is they could use 4IR to become important players in carbon neutrality. For example, using blockchain, etc., it's very much possible for them to actually track their carbon much better, and hence enter the carbon markets, and in fact get credits if they do a lot of afforestation and other things, because blockchain would then be able to actually verify the amount of carbon sequestration they have been able to do. So it's not that, just because LDCs are not big emitters of carbon, it means that 4IR doesn't have any role to play in carbon neutrality for those particular countries. It does have a role, and that needs to be kept in mind. And moving on to, to the same theme of absorption, diffusion, and eventually reaching the last mile. That is, and what better avenues can be there for that than the SMEs? And 4IR, interestingly, is going to be very useful for the SMEs and could therefore the economic benefits of 4IR could percolate, down to the SMEs also. Earlier industrial revolutions have typically created bigger monopolies. For example, there used to be a very competitive market for candles, but when electricity started, it created these monopoly of utilities. This doesn't mean that that digital transformation will not create monopolies. It will also create monopolies. But the good news is that it will not completely obliterate other industries or small players. In fact, it will empower them even more. And it will unlock a lot of economic opportunities for them. And this is what needs to be kept in mind, because there is often some kind of apprehension that any kind of industrial revolution will, further empower the entrenched interests. And while of course that is not totally untrue, even in the fourth industrial revolution, but the benefits that it will bring about far outweigh any kind of economic or societal disruption that might happen. So for example, the 4IR has an opportunity to create very novel value chains. Just to give an illustration, Ugandan coffee manufacturers, or for that matter, cacao manufacturers, could actually brand their produce as locally produced or actually produced in Uganda and charge premium price, because right now there are a lot of knockoff chocolates and coffees which claim to be Ugandan but are not originally from Uganda. So that's just one illustration. E-commerce offers enormous amount of opportunity for even small producers to sell their goods through these electronic retail channels. And again, within that, AI could help them actually track what their consumers actually want and connect them to global markets. Okay, so 4IR does present some very dazzling opportunities for SMEs. And of course, on slide 13, there are other examples also. For example, 3D printing or additive manufacturing. It could benefit even a very small craftsman in a rural part of an LDC, because access to that particular technology is much cheaper, and as compared to, say, the earlier revolutions in which you had to rely essentially on very heavy machinery, which was highly capital intensive. This is not to suggest that 4IR doesn't require capital goods. It does, but at the level of the infrastructure, not at the level of absorption, at the or the utilization by SMEs. So those are the key points that we have covered in this particular background note, and I do hope that it fosters discussion. Our objective is precisely to do that, and that is to engender a very healthy discussion on what are the challenges and, most importantly, what needs to be done. And I always like to close my any presentation with the famous saying by the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu: "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." So let's start now, because unless we act right now, the divide between the haves and the have-nots will only exacerbate. Climate change will only exacerbate. So this is the opportune moment for us to act. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta. Absolutely. What is the first step we can take and we should take into the future, and what is it what we can do? The challenges, but also presenting the opportunities that are ahead of us and the actions and activities that have already been taken. And on that hand, I would like to continue the panel discussion. Now talking to and asking Mr. Adhikari, on the basis of your experience, what new policies are necessary to ensure that mainstreaming the 4IR are leveraged to support SME development in LDCs. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Excellency, colleagues, and the participants. In order to enhance the accessibility, affordability, and application of fourth industrial revolution technologies, particularly in the context of the small and medium enterprises, there are several policies that are necessary. Starting with, I want to divide them into two parts. One, what I call enabling policies. Then the other one, I call them mitigating policies. And while presenting my thoughts, I would be borrowing or discussing some of the points that were already discussed by Bernardo and Ravi. So in terms of the enabling policies, I think it's extremely important that we have a comprehensive science, technology, and innovation policies that does not only drive the fourth industrial revolution, but the overall industrial transformation that is required at this point in time. So for that, you have that policy, but then it interacts with several other policies, right? So, and for example, it interacts with the ICT or digital policy, which is extremely important for countries to not only enhance accessibility, but also affordability of these technologies. Here we are talking about the digital technology, electricity, and other elements as the foundation that is required in order to enhance both accessibility and affordability. So that's something very, very important. And then you should have, if you don't already have a fiscal policy that can provide, some kind of subsidy or some kind of incentive for conducting research and development, particularly to the private sector. It's not only the research development from the public institution that matters. It's the research and development investment by the private sector that would really help LDCs to take advantage of the opportunities, and particularly when that benefits percolates down to the small and medium enterprises. And the investment policy. The reason, and this is something that Bernardo also mentioned, it's investment policy can take the form of, let's say, removing cap on foreign ownership. That could be one. But investment policy can also take the form of, actively promoting investment in these sectors, particularly in digital technology and this 4IR technology. And finally, countries that have put in place public-private policies, such as Rwanda, the example that I want to cite in the context of LDCs, Rwanda being one of the better performers in this area, is often cited as an example. So they have a public-private partnership policy, which allows public sector and private sector to work together, pool resources, pool expertise, pool knowledge and skill together in order to deliver benefits to the business at large and small and medium enterprises in particular. But then you need to have mitigating policies also. When we talk about mitigating policies, I just want to mention two. One is the policy relating to data protection. That's absolutely critical, not only to enhance the security and safety aspect of it for the user of the technologies, but also to prevent them from, potential cyber attacks. So that's very, very fundamental. But at the same time, competition policy is, something that Ravi mentioned. I want to slightly differ here, but then, we can have this exchange, within this platform or later. Here, the 10 companies basically, and 6 countries control almost 99% of the total patent on fourth industrial revolution technology. Is this healthy? I don't know, right? So, competition policy is required to create level playing field so that, small and medium enterprises can also take part in this technological sort of revolution. Competition policy in the form of predatory pricing, price discrimination, exclusive dealing, hostile takeover. If these cannot be prevented, then the possibility of small and medium enterprises growing, actually, entering the market itself is a challenge, but then, growing would be a significant challenge for them. You've seen, some of the startups being taken over by giant companies. I don't want to name all of them. You know that already. I mean, all of us know that, right? So that is a kind of a potential threat to wider application of technology and particular use by small and medium enterprises. So these are the policies, but I want to just, stop by saying 3 points which are cross-cutting in nature. It's not only the policy that you have in place and everything would be okay. You have to have the necessary capacity. You have to have the necessary institutional framework and resources to implement those policies, as well as to monitor the implementation so that, you can do a bit of a learning by doing. That's important. The second one is that policies are not set in stone. You need to, and this is a publication that earlier publication of UNIDO also mentioned this, and this is very clear as done in a country such as Germany, is that, a policy, there has to be enough room for policy innovation and policy experimentation. And this is a famous term that used to be, quite extensively used by Danny Roderick and others. But, this is absolutely critical. And finally, what is important is to ensure, as Bernardo said, the policies that are inclusive in nature, so that the women, the youth, the micro, small and medium enterprises and other vulnerable segment of the population and the small and medium enterprises owned by them, are not left behind. So it is equally important. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much for providing this opportunity.
Thank you very much. It's very clear on having the enabling and the mitigation policies and really going into that details. Thank you very much. Just a small account on that, talking about private investments and the needs for incentive there is really an issue across the world, and that can change the investment into new technologies. Talking about technologies, thank you very much, Mr. Atikari. Talking about technologies, we're now moving to Mr. Setipa and UN technology, and how can really the LDCs leverage the technology transfer to strengthen the digital capacities and capabilities, as was just announced earlier?
Thank you very much, Selma, for this opportunity for me to make a contribution to this important discussion. And let me also acknowledge all my good friends on the panel, Excellency the State Secretary and other colleagues and participants. I think we all agree that science, technology, and innovation in recent decades has contributed significantly to the development of many countries. And yet the reality is that among the LDCs have not fully benefited from this technological advancement, but also that since the category was established, they continue to lag behind and are structurally weak compared to other countries. We should also bear in mind that while the 46 LDCs, or 43 as of yesterday, are all in one category, the levels of development within them also varies quite wildly. There are some LDCs, as we've just heard, that are at the top of the list when it comes to technology and advancements in that regard. But there are also other LDCs that are still struggling with challenges related to the second and the third industrial revolution. And yet the world, as we sit here, already talking about the fourth industrial revolution. So that's the scale of the challenge that LDCs have to face. It is also a fact that the fourth industrial revolution is driven by technologies such as AI, robotics, and Internet of Things, to name a few. And these can provide rapid development that can also increase, but it can also increase levels of inequalities within and amongst countries, particularly in the LDCs. Now, technology transfer is a very big part of addressing the gaps that the LDCs face and trying to close this gap that exists. But effective technology transfer also requires LDCs to invest and develop their own infrastructure. It requires them to invest to enhance their technological capabilities towards new production systems. And there's also a need for LDCs to build capacities on their regulatory institutions. And I think this point was also made very clearly, particularly when we talk about data policy. It is also important that as we work towards mainstreaming fourth industrial revolution in the LDCs, that the requisite technologies are also closely aligned with the continued effort to enhance access to the internet. Connectivity and bridging the digital divide between the developed and the developing and the least developed countries is very critical. And I think COVID has exposed the challenges that LDCs face. Just look at education. Over 60% of children in the LDCs were totally locked out of the educational system for quite a long time. SMEs in the LDCs were shut out of their markets. And if you look at the GDP of Africa, for example, which is over 80% SMEs, that meant that over 80% of African economies ground to a stop. That's the scale of the challenge that we face just looking at connectivity. It is also a fact that only 20% of the population in the LDCs have access to the internet. This is out of a total population of 1.2 billion people. So this, I think, puts into perspective the scale of this challenge, but also the fact that before, and I'm not even suggesting that the technologies and the steps that LDCs have to take to catch up with the rest of the world are not important, but we need to understand what the underlying or the landscape that they have to achieve this has to be based on. It has to be based primarily on connectivity. Connectivity and an investment in enhancing the ecosystem that will allow the rest of the puzzle to fall into place. Unless the ecosystem that facilitates the flow of investments, the flow of venture capital, the flow of everything that is required is in place, then we will not be able to make the progress that we need to make, not only to close the gap, but more importantly, to achieve the sustainable development agenda. And we have less than 10 years left. We have about 9 years left to achieve the SDGs. And that is the scale of the challenge. We also believe that the development partners of the LDCs have an opportunity. In a few weeks, we will meet in Doha, Qatar, for the 5th UN Conference for LDCs. And that is where the LDCs and the development partners will review the last 10 years and also map the way for the next 10 years as to what has to be done to be able to achieve all this. Now, this calls for very radical thinking, because if that is not the case, then we will meet again in 10 years' time and we will still lament on the widening gap between the LDCs and the rest of the world, and the challenges that they face, which are now being made, which are worsened by the pandemics that we are told this is not the last of. We are told to expect more pandemics. We are told that we need to look at how do we build resilience. If we can build resilience, for example, in our healthcare systems, how can we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, which is driven primarily not only by technology, but investment in human capital? So all these are the prerequisites that have to be put in place to be able to talk effectively about having the LDCs around the table when we discuss what the fourth industrial revolution can do and the potential it has to lift millions of people out of poverty, drive inclusive growth, and ensure transparent stability, and also enhance quality of life. But we are very much aware that technology transfer is very critical to that. And also, last point to make is that technology transfer is not just availability of technologies to transfer. It is also the ability to put in place the institutional capacity to identify, to adopt, and to adapt the technologies that are available so that they can be able to be scaled up and help LDCs achieve their developmental objectives. So there is a need not only to look only on the supply side, but let's also look on the demand side. How do we build capacities around institutionalizing technology transfer so that LDCs see and use technology transfer as part of their toolbox for development? There is a huge potential there, but there is a lot of work that we need to do. And as partners for the LDCs, as a UN system, we are very much able and ready to be able to provide that support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I love that. Let's call for very radical change in thinking, and that's absolutely needed. We would like to hear from Mr. Casadila Sarmiento about what really concrete interventions will you need to undertake in the short and medium term to support the LDCs into the transition towards the fourth IR.
Thank you, Selma. Let me take from where Mr. Setipa left, and you like, we need to be decisive. And that is, we are talking about 4IR, we're talking about technological transformation, we're talking about innovation. And today, innovation is a must, it's not an option. Yeah, what I always say is we moved into cyberspace during COVID, we moved into cyberspace because of necessity. But we need to move to the innovation era, not out of policy. We have a necessity, and we need to also be more proactive. And I like the notion, where are we going to be in 10 years? Yeah, and if we do not start now to taking these decisions, we will not reach there. Obviously, in that, having said that, for UNIDO, we always have to look, okay, before we say what we are on, what we would like to do, we need to listen to what the countries are demanding for. But we talked already, and I don't want to repeat in detail, but we talked about the structural constraint. We talked about absorption capacity, obstacles. We talked also about incomplete innovation ecosystems, because they are not integrating basic science, especially with investment and the linkage. And I think this is an important element that I would like to add to the discussion, is the notion of connecting the dots, and partnership building is part of it. We need to think in terms of public sector, private sector. The private sector has a very important role to play in this equation. They are the driving force of technology, but we need also to strengthen the countries to do, and universities can play an important role. And something where we are not, UNIDO is not directly active, which is basic infrastructure, which is the main structural barrier, but we need to advocate more for that. And here again, it is not to leave the notion of basic infrastructure as a domain of the national level, but we need to advocate for thinking regionally, for thinking multilaterally, in order to address the issues of basic infrastructure, because the LDCs, they have limited resources, they have a lot of demands, and there is a lot of synergies that can be gained by collaboration. And UNIDO can play an important role playing the advocacy. And also forging these partnerships. We are very happy to be joined by the EIF, by the Technology Bank, UN Technology Bank, at the level, let's say, at the institutional level. But we are working also closely with Alibaba, Siemens, Mercedes, with many companies in order to deploy these technologies, because they are the owner of the knowledge, but we need to connect the dots. We are also working closely with the UN ECA, and this is one of the issues that we need to do from the outset, is to have, first of all, the awareness phase ready. We still need to do, and this is the short term, we still need to do this advocacy, to raise awareness of the urgency of the matter. this momentum has to be built. That and this is not through technical cooperation. When it comes to technical cooperation, we are presenting our 4IR strategic framework I mentioned before, and certainly we have a number of tools for capacity building of enterprises, readiness of enterprises, sector-specific intervention on innovation and technology advisory services in strategies, and we will continue to work in relation to the medium term, especially to develop programs, develop technical cooperation. So at the beginning, it's about convening, advocacy, partnership, and then building also the necessary programs, because there we can still, in many LDCs, help, although the capacities, the capabilities of the LDCs are growing to themselves attract the knowledge. It's not attracting only capital, but to make these synergies work together. As far as UNIDO is concerned, we have defined these 4 areas, and we hope also this will be retained in the recommendation. Digital transformation coming from the bottom, firms, digital transformation of firms, improving skills and capacities, and there we will have also the inclusiveness policies. This building the innovation ecosystem, we need really to work and improve the innovation ecosystem. There are already a lot of elements, but we need to link them. We need to link them regionally. Some LDCs cannot afford to have their own innovation ecosystem. Maybe we can help them to work at the sub-regional level. Partnerships, and finally, it is about investment. Yeah. If we want to transform, digital transformation cannot happen at any level without investment. And sure, we need good governance, we need values. And this is back to the SDGs. We need to think in terms of people, planet, and prosperity. We cannot continue with a single economic vision. So this is very important that we coordinate at all the levels. So I think I will leave it at that. There are a number of examples that we could share where we have been already having good experience and experimenting. In Ghana, for example, we have been trying to implement traceability system for the cocoa value chain, and this has been working very well. We can extrapolate and use these pilot examples. Global positioning systems and artificial intelligence to do the debushing of invasive species in Namibia. All these examples that you probably heard of, we're moving forward, are very important to help to show that yes, the momentum is there and that it's not too early to start. We need a long way to go, and the best way to go through a long way is to start with the first steps.
Thank you. Yes, to start with the first steps and to walk together, right? And this is definitely something you have mentioned, the partnerships and the connections. And you mentioned also some of the partners UNIDO is working with. And we have today Ms. Dalmo from Siemens. And the question is based on your private experience and your experience in the private sector and working on the African continent. What are the most pressing challenges does LDC need to overcome to accelerate their progress towards mainstreaming of the 4IR? Ms. Sabine Dalmo, the stage is yours. Yes, the weather is wonderful in South Africa.
Thank you, Selma, and thank you for having me on the panel. And it was very interesting to listen into all the contributions so far. Well, looking at a company like Siemens, who is already on the African continent active for more than 160 years, so we have obviously done all 4 waves of the Industrial Revolution, and we do see that there are a few areas specifically in the developing countries which need to be addressed and where there is a challenge in order to support also with our technology the rollout and attract at the end foreign direct investments, which then again, will contribute to digital application within, for instance, the food and beverage environment or in the agricultural business. So one thing what we see is definitely a poor infrastructure base. And this is not valid for all countries. There are a few countries, if I look now at the African continent, which are really doing well. If you take Rwanda, you take Kenya, also partially South Africa, which have already invested lots of money into the development of connectivity. So a lot of people, even in rural areas, have access to networks, 4G, but really to foster the industrial revolution and have a possibility to apply the full suite of technologies available, you do require a kind of a 5G network. And even in South Africa currently we don't have that. The legislations around releasing spectrum is quite cumbersome. And so I think the collaboration here as well with the bigger telecommunication players, be it like the Vodacoms, the Safaricoms, MTN, and others which are active on the continent, I think is absolutely vital to make sure that rollout can be done as quick as possible, because there is a huge interest in the African market. Because you see companies coming like Amazon and Google, they're setting up data centers in Ghana, in Accra, in South Africa, but also in Rwanda. And they do see the value because we have a largely untapped population, which is available for business. Yeah, as the middle income class is growing, or so we have seen a little setback within the COVID times. But in general, the progression is to a positive way, and these kind of technologies are obviously vital to make sure that technology can be applied not only in industrial spaces, but rather for a wider population. Secondly, there is, I mentioned already, the agricultural business. If you look at the African countries, you have often the resource extracting countries, you have agricultural intense countries. And when you go into countries which particularly are focused on the agricultural environment, you see a very low industrialization, and hence you see a very low adaptation of digital technologies. And here the governments of the countries do need to entice and help to get these kind of technologies rolled out into the rural areas, to make sure that if you're an agricultural producer and you want to participate in the global value chain, you need to achieve a certain standard, because otherwise your product is just not competitive. And it doesn't matter if it's something you produce on an industrial scale, or even if you have like a papaya or anything else what you are going to export, because to be competitive, it needs to have a guaranteed standard, which is every time the same. Yeah. So here we do see that there is a possibility to also attract industries which are using digital technology by really, creating this fertile ground of adaptation, but also, as I said before, the network. More important for me is, and this goes a bit into the direction that in many least developed countries, you see the government itself taking a lot of control of the infrastructure. And that's also valid for digital infrastructure, be it the telecommunication services or anything else. I see, and as Siemens, we see the government rather being the regulator, the one who sets a frame, but doesn't actively participate in, providing these services. Because if you want to do it really good, you need to do it professional, and that is obviously something the private business can do better than a government. So I think many of the countries then need to let go, to let private business come in to professionalize the service, and on their side really set the regulatory framework, which then helps them to achieve what they have in their vision for the country. One aspect in here the partnership with companies like Siemens and also what's done within the UNIDO framework is so important, is really around education within the wider population, meaning not only at universities, but also at technical colleges, in schools, in high schools, really having the possibility to learn about coding, learn about digital applications so that young people get enticed to use it then other than just the cell phone and have some kind of easy, digital tools handy, but rather have them as a skilled workforce within the country, which is important because if you want to attract foreign direct investment, it is about regulations, it's about the rule of law, and it's also about the availability of resources, particular the workforce, because that's what you later on count on, which basically makes sure that your product comes up to a certain level. So education here from our side, we have strong partnerships with many of the countries. We have more than 20 universities around the African continent, be it from Ghana, Burkina Faso, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, and anything in between, where we work together and really help them with, for instance, low-code software, to understand how coding works so that we also can connect with them through a kind of a partnership and buddy-buddy system to ensure that also these people which currently don't have these industries have the possibility to have access to real-life business examples. Because we need to ensure as business, and that's obviously something we need to bring forward, is that the divide between the educational part and the later on the application, which in the real world it's happening, that merges together. And it's no good to have, the best education in the world if you have no practical experience, because business will very likely not hire you if you just come with a theoretic background. And this is one part where we want to help countries, where we seek also partnerships. And I do hope also that through the platform which we have going here, that we have the possibility to connect exactly with these kind of institutions, because sometimes it's also difficult for us to find the access to these kind of institutions, because that's not the space where we normally play in. But I want to comment because some of the previous speakers referred particular also to the participation of small and medium enterprises. And what we have seen particular now in the last 18 months while COVID was ongoing, that we could incorporate many of these small and medium enterprises, particular, would say rather medium enterprises maybe, particular in the space of the energy business. And here through an initiative which the now former Chancellor Angela Merkel has put forward as part of the compact with Africa, we could support, for instance, in Ghana, one of the companies to produce switchgears locally within the country, and so also help them to get through a kind of a development program which is underpinned with funding for the initial investment to really feed into our digital supply chain. And so, I think it's a great initiative, and it also shows, how various countries can work together for the benefit of the ones which hadn't had the chance yet. But business and our commitment is to support in this space as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dalmo. And this is definitely an important aspect of creating and enabling through private businesses the professionalization and further investments in that. And I would like to give the floor now to His Excellency Lopez and to tell us more about how his country and how his digital transformation has contributed to Cabo Verde's recent graduation to middle-income country status. Yes. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. Also, congratulations to the speakers. I think we are in the right path, at least creating the awareness of the things that we need to change. Well, here in Cabo Verde, we are a small country, as I said, just 500,000 people, 1 hour to Senegal, but then in a special geographic position because we are the closest sub-Saharan African country to Europe, 3.5 hours to Lisbon, more or less. The closest African country to the US, 6 hours. The closest African country to Brazil, 6 hours as well. So that puts us in a crosswalk between continents. That is really important. We have double of our population outside of Cabo Verde. Scarcity of water was always a problem of our country, and that made us open to the world, because we have 1 million Cape Verdeans in Boston area. We have Cape Verdeans in Portugal. They used to be the biggest immigration community. Now is Brazilians. We have a lot of Cape Verdeans in Netherlands, in Luxembourg. So that make a small country very open to the world. But to understand the history of Cabo Verde, you have to follow the rate of slavery. Europeans used to go to Senegal and Gambia at the time, Senegambia, bring them to Cabo Verde, sell them here, and then take them to Brazil, to the big plantations. So Cabo Verde was a big marketplace at the time for slavery. We want to change that narrative with innovation. We want to rebrand that history of the world. First of all, we want to attract talent to Cabo Verde. The previous panelist was speaking about access to the internet. Here in Cape Verde, we have 80% of internet penetration in our country, with people already having access to 4G. And we want, as I said before, provide internet as a basic good. We are defining the legal framework for it. So we are betting on infrastructures, first of all, with our technology park. It's a big investment of the government of Cabo Verde. We were doing it even before COVID-19. We started before COVID-19. It will be ready in the beginning of 2023. And it's going to be an important, it's going to be the house of the digital warriors, as I said. Even though in Cabo Verde we never had a war, I think we need to make sure that young people are prepared to face the challenges that will come. So a big investment on infrastructures with the tech park. Also, we are betting on a state-of-art sea submarine cable that will connect Brazil, South America, and in Europe. We'll tie them in Cabo Verde. That will improve our connectivity. Link that will allow us to go for 5G and also to improve our connectivity. And again, using our geographical position to sell capability to other countries of Africa that are in our neighborhood. We want to use our geographical position and capitalize that. That's why we are investing on the sea submarine cable. So betting on infrastructures, but also betting on human capital. Cape Verde is a country that we don't have diamonds, we don't have oil. Maybe that's the answer for always being in peace. It's not because we are better than the others, it's because of the context. But what we have done, as I mentioned, scarcity of water was a big problem and still is a big problem of Cabo Verde. We always bet everything on human capital. But times are changing, so we need to change as well the way that we train young people. We start having classes of English from 5th grade, because English is the language of the internet. But also in all the secondary schools of Cabo Verde, you're going to find a boat container a bit higher than normal, with solar panels, where kids can learn robotics and they can learn how to code in all the secondary schools. It's not mandatory, and we already trained 25,000 young people. Again, we are just 500,000 people in Cabo Verde, so those numbers are relevant for us. With that experience, we reduce the school dropout and we increase the grades on mathematics. People and young people, they start to go more to school, and again, it's not mandatory. but these trainings are always full because young people, they want to be close where the computers are and they want to be close to the internet. All of them are connected with themselves, so you can deliver a training in one, because Cabo Verde is divided by 10 islands, so it's important to have that in mind. So you can deliver a training in one of the web labs, it's how we call them, and they can be seen in another web lab. With solar panels, because we are a very sunny country and we want to be sustainable as well. We are already running with 30% on sustainable energy, but our goal is to improve that. The rate literacy in Cabo Verde for young people is really high, almost as high as United States of America. But we need to prepare young people for this revolution. It's impossible that you stop the wave with your hands. What we need is to give them the conditions to surf this wave. That is the most important thing. And young people will do the rest. They are prepared. They were born. They are native digitals. They were born with their curiosity to use it and to explore a world that has no limits, and that world is the internet. But what they need is to have someone guiding them, protecting them. In the beginning, it's important that the internet is not just this fantastic tool, but is also dangerous. We need to be inclusive in our approach. Inclusive to protect young people, but also inclusive to make sure that people that have more, that are older, they can have access as well to e-government services and to other services that make their lives better. In Cabo Verde, we have more than 80 e-gov applications, where population can use it, but also that's one of the things that prevent corruption in our country. In Cabo Verde, corruption barely doesn't exist. And again, it's not because we are better than the others, but because of the procedures there. Everything is very digital. So you protect the state, you protect the money of the taxpayers. And again, not much resources in the country. So you have to be creative and you have to use innovation at your service. So infrastructures, human capital, and the last one, it's community. Everyone talks about ecosystems, but there is no ecosystem without a community. It's really important. So we created this flag, we call it Cabo Verde Digital. Cabo Verde Digital, even though it's a government organization, a government initiative, it's who takes forward Cabo Verde Digital is the startups, the NGOs, the universities, and the private companies. Inside Cabo Verde Digital, we have two main goals. One, to train young people and prepare them to the digital world. The second one, to promote digital entrepreneurship. Those are the main things. We started, and I'm just going to make reference to 3 or 4 of our flag initiatives. One is the first digital entrepreneurship program of Cabo Verde. We give each Cape Verdean that wants to open a business that uses the digital 3 minimum salaries during 6 months, plus technical assistance, plus incubation. Where we incubate these ideas in the universities, because can be a young person that is in the last year of the course or just finished their degree, and also with telecom companies and other private companies that use digital and they have more experience. They should be the one incubating this business. They have the experience and they have the network, and they can be the first clients of these small startups. So this program created the first digital entrepreneurship program of Cabo Verde. We are creating 100 startups per year. It's a collaboration model because it needs to be 2 young people go together, a girl and a boy, or a boy and a boy, or a girl and the girl. They go together in a collaborative spirit, and they try to find solutions for the country. During these 6 months, they don't need to worry with anything else beside their business idea, and again focus on digital as a tool of development. Can be digital being used for renewable energy, can be digital being used for agriculture, can be digital being used for sea economy, the tourism sector. Those are the axes of Cabo Verde for development. So all of these things, the digital is not the end by itself. It can be a tool to uplift of the other sectors. Another program that we start is the Go Global, that allows our startups to be present in this type of events internationally. We need to give them a platform. It's very expensive to be present in international events, but needs to be a bet and investment of least development countries on these young startups. They will change their countries. Also, we start with a remote working program and attracting a talent to Cabo Verde. Cabo Verde is a very, very special place, Selma. People here are not chased by color of skin, by their religion or sexuality. So those things are really important for us, because you can celebrate your freedom. If you don't harm the environment, if you don't harm the others around you, come to Cabo Verde, celebrate that, and use that to be more creative. And in the end of the day, you can go and have a swim in our beautiful white sandy beaches that we have here, with 29 degrees the entire year. So it's really sunny. It's a special place. So those are some of the programs that we have. Just to close the final remarks, one thing that I think it's really important for least developed countries is to attract the diaspora to return. We have a lot of people that left least developed countries for economical reasons. They need to return, they need to invest, but also these people, they study in the best universities, they already work for multinational companies, they need to return to their countries. In Cabo Verde, we want our diaspora to return. Bright Minds is time to return, but also Bright Minds around the world. Visit us on digital.cv. You can find all the information about the amazing things that we are doing in Cabo Verde, Africa. Thank you, Selma, and sorry for talking too much, but as a politician, that's what I do.
Thank you very much. It sounds like a startup, what you are creating over there, and with all the spirit that it has. Thank you very much. And I would like to give the floor for the final remarks, or not. Tell us more about the example in Tanzania. Unfortunately, we are kind of running out of time, but I would really like Mr. Wilson to take the floor and tell us in a few minutes the experience in Tanzania.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will be very quick. First of all, I will discuss a few of what has been talked by the rest, looking at the challenges we, the LDC, are facing. I personally see the challenges as opportunities. Opportunities in two ways. One, now it means while we unlock the challenges, there are businesses that are going to prosper in the way, the ones that use innovations, the ones that innovate, the ones that are faster to leap into the fourth industrial revolution. But again, what is important is that while we solve the challenges we face in adapting to the fourth industrial revolution, it now means that we are capable. If we are well positioned, we are capable now to leap forward, not going into the business as usual speed, but now we are capable to move far and faster. So those are the two opportunities I'm seeing besides the challenges we perceive to the least developed countries. But for Tanzania, we also view that the 4IR is indispensable. We are all geared to that direction, and that it is mandatory that we become competitive in terms of products, services, and qualities thereof. But again, the way we look at science and technology and innovation, we saw this coming as we have already, through our Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, we have the Tanzania Commission for Science and Technology. The commission is there to to promote S&T, but to organize S&T from higher learning institutions, from individuals, from companies, and so forth. Therefore, this is a way that will be utilized and to strengthen so that now we go faster to adapt to all these developments. But now, as I said, it goes into developing the products, into the processes, services, and also to innovate the same positively, not doing the same way we used to do before. Therefore, we perceive the 4IR as a driver to competitive in terms of products and our services. And so far, that also calls, to be capable, to be responsible in skills development. We have to, the people, the community must have the necessary skills so that now they can adapt and they can go ahead with the speed of 4IR. I think I would stop there because most have been discussed by my colleague. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson, showing the opportunities and really forwarding there. Yes, we are coming to the end of this panel. I would like to ask you just to stay with us for a few more minutes and to have the final remarks from Mr. Camilla. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Selma, and thank you to all panelists for this fascinating conversation. I just want to say that we are presenting the 4IR Strategic Framework next week in Vienna during UNIDO's General Conference. Then in next year, we will be preparing the specific regional approaches with a major emphasis on least developed countries. And we will also be at the 5th UN Conference on the LDCs, the LDC 5 in January. So we look forward working together with the Enhanced Integrated Framework, the UN Technology Bank, other UN agencies, private sector corporations, and continuing this dialogue with member states. So thank you, and back to you, Selma.
Thank you very much for announcing this. And this is my role as the host here today. My name is Selma, and it was an awesome pleasure to be with you today. It was a very interesting and highly moving conversation. As it was said, it is time now to make the first step. And if we want to move along, then we have to move together. Thank you very much to everybody for being with us today, and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.